Hello guys, I am Vishal and I welcome you all to this session by Edureka. Today I'm going to give you an overview of yet another Microsoft Azure concept, and today's topic of discussion is Azure Active Directory. But before we do go ahead and understand what an Active Directory exactly is, let's start by taking a look at today's agenda first. So what do we have here? First and foremost, we would be starting things off by understanding what an Azure Active Directory exactly is and why it is needed. We would also understand what is the difference between Azure Active Directory and Windows Active Directory. We would also understand what are the different audiences this Active Directory caters and discuss what are its different editions. I would also talk about what are Azure Active Directory tenants. Finally, I would finish things off with the demo part. Now, when we talk about the demo, I would be talking about how do you go ahead and create users and how do you go ahead and create an Active Directory. I would also be discussing quite a few other terms as well, but that is for the later part. Let's start by understanding what an Azure Active Directory exactly is. Let us start by taking a look at the definition first. Now, if I talk about the definition, this is what we have. It is Microsoft's multi-tenant, cloud-based directory and identity management service that combines core directory services, application access management, and identity protection into a single solution. Now, there's so many terms in it and so many things to understand. Let me simplify this definition so that you understand it in a much better way. To do that, I would be giving you an example. Think of it in this way. Suppose I am a cloud vendor, or not a cloud vendor, I am a service vendor and I reside on a cloud. That means I have a particular application that runs on cloud. Now, this service is used by quite a few customers. Plus, there are quite a few organizations that I have to interact with. Now, in this case, all these medias or customers and organizations, they have to communicate with me. So how do they do it? Well, what they would do is they would go ahead and create an account or maybe have some user IDs through which they can actually communicate with me. Now, this is okay if the number is countable or manageable. Suppose there was a situation where we had n number of people and the number of people was constantly increasing. Suppose I have somewhere around 1000, 2000 people. Now, these many logins and these many credentials, managing all these can be a huge problem. Let me give you an example. How does this happen exactly, or what problems do you face normally? Suppose I have 10 organizations. Now, to log into all these or give access to all these 10 organizations can be a huge problem. Why? All these organizations might have different kind of accesses. Based on that, I have to set in different security protocols as well. If certain organizations have an easier protocol, what if they get an access to other organizations as well, or to the data that other organizations have to correspond to? In that case, it can be a huge problem. Apart from that, I might have n number of customers, and keeping track of so many customers can again be a problem when you talk about creating credentials. So all this is a huge problem. So what happened was Microsoft Azure, it went ahead and created something called as Azure Active Directory. It is nothing but something that acts as a middleware. It takes care of all the sign-ins and all these things. How? Now the users will have a single sign-on process. That means they would sign in only once. Plus, they can have access to the applications that are there, which I provide them. Now, this intermediary, that is your Active Directory, what it does is it federates all the responsibilities of taking care of access and all those things. That is, the way I set all the rules, it just incorporates those rules and accordingly it gives access to all the users, thus simplifying all the complexities that I would face otherwise. So this is what an Active Directory exactly is. It basically goes ahead and simplifies all the signing in and user authentication processes, or identification processes rather. Now, as we move further, we would be discussing quite a few other terms and you'd be having a clearer picture as to what I'm saying exactly. But meanwhile, you just bear with me and let's move further and try to understand what are the other points that we need to talk about. Okay, yes, I did miss out on this point. What Microsoft Azure does is it also gives you something called as a better platform where developers can develop their applications with a lot more ease. Again, as we move further, we'd be understanding this point as well. So what is the exact difference between Windows AD and Azure AD? Let's try to understand that as well. Now, when you talk about Windows AD, that is Active Directory, these are the layers it has to take care of. You have something called as your domain services, you have your lightweight directories, you have your federation services, certificate services, and rights management services as well. Now, these are so many things to take care of. When you talk about your Active Directory with Microsoft Azure, it combines all these layers into two. Firstly, you have your Windows Azure Active Directory. Now, it is something that takes care of all the services that surround or revolve around identity problems. That is, when you talk about identification management, this is the part that takes care of it. That is your WAAD. And then we have the other part where you have to actually go ahead and communicate with other organizations. I gave you an example of 10 different organizations needing 10 different things. That is federating all these organizations. Your Windows Azure Access Control Services, it takes care of all those things. So both these so-called Active Directories, they more or less serve similar purposes, but the approach in which they do is completely different. Your Active Directory has more layered approach where every service is given a different layer or different way of handling it. But when you talk about your Microsoft Azure Active Directory, it simplifies things. Your first layer takes care of most of the things, and the remaining things are something that is taken care by a Windows Azure Access Control Service. Also, when you talk about Active Directory, it uses something called as LDAP for various other communications. But when you talk about your Azure Active Directory, here you use something called as your REST APIs. Again, the approach is completely different. So what are the audiences that are catered by this directory? Well, first and foremost, we have IT admins. Now, when I talk about IT admins, what Microsoft Azure Active Directory does is it provides in single sign-on for various applications. Now, there are quite a few SaaS applications, that is software as a service applications, and various on-premise applications to which you have a single sign-on. You do not have to log in every now and then. Now, I've worked on quite a few applications and places where you have to log in every now and then. You have a lot of trouble because you have to remember so many passwords and so many logins, and these different credentials can be a problem. Now, this is something your Microsoft Azure takes care of. Single sign-on is very convenient. Apart from that, it ensures strong identification, and there are quite a few processes that ensure this. Now, I won't be discussing those points in detail, but yes, when you talk about identification, Microsoft Azure ensures that it happens in a very good manner. Plus, it automates quite a few processes, again easing up this process. Apart from that, it also caters quite a few developers as well. Now, I'm talking about quite a few organizations, and since sign-on becomes easier here, your application developers can focus on building applications. And since they have access to so many organizations and so many resources, application development definitely becomes easier. Online customers. Now, people who have been working for quite a while, they might know that we have things like Office 365, or you have your CRM services as well. Now, you had an access to all these things by using your Windows Active Directory, but your Microsoft Azure Active Directory also gives you access to all these services. That means if you're using or have account on any one of these things, you can have access to all these services or have access to all the Active Directory services that Azure has to provide to you. So what this does is it caters the needs of various online customers as well. So let us try to understand the next point, that is Azure Active Directory Editions. For that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and switch into the Microsoft's web page basically, or I'm going to switch into my browser and move to their website and talk about all these points. So instead, what I would do is I would first discuss the last point. And before we do go ahead and take a look at the demo, then we would just go ahead and talk about these points as well so that we can directly switch into the demo part. So let's move further and try to understand the next point and then come back to this point. So what are tenants basically? Now, when you talk about a tenant, it is nothing but an organization. I just mentioned that we have tens of organizations that a particular application might cater. Now, all these organizations are treated as tenants. All these tenants can have access to a particular Active Directory or more than one Active Directory. As we move into the demo part, I would be talking about how to create multiple directories as well. Yes, we can have more than one Active Directory. We'll discuss that as we move into the demo part. But before that, you just understand these points as in what I'm trying to say exactly. Yes, what happens here exactly is when you talk about a tenant, first and foremost, it is nothing but an organization, and it is a dedicated instance of your Azure Active Directory service. Plus, these are isolated instances. That means, as I mentioned, we have 10 organizations or 5 organizations. You'd be having isolated instances for each of these organizations, ensuring that they stay aloof and their services and their protocols are maintained differently. This is where your Azure Active Directory steps in. It takes care of all these things. It ensures that nothing is ambiguous or nothing is intermixed. Everything stays separate. Plus, each and every platform or organization gets serviced equally well. As we move further, we would be creating users, and then I would give you the differences as in what a tenant is, how do you go ahead and create all the domains and all those things. So again, into the demo part, you'd be understanding these topics with little more clarity or more understanding rather. This is the demo part, but before that, as I've already mentioned, let me quickly switch to the website of Microsoft Azure and I would be discussing the editions that you can choose from, and then we can directly jump into the demo part. Okay, guys, so this is a Microsoft doc basically, which talks about choosing an edition. So these are the options you have. We would be finishing this quickly and then we would be switching into the demo part. So let's understand this. Now, what Microsoft Azure does is it gives you various options. First and foremost, you have three options to pick from. And out of these three options, the first one is your basic option, that is your Active Directory basic. Then you have your premium, which is P1. And then you have one more premium, which is P2. All these things provide you with different options that you have. First and foremost, your main job is to have your access, that is your identity management, your security, and your single sign-on and all those things. Now, these are some of the services that come with your basic account as well, and also with your free account. What Microsoft Azure does is, for people who are completely new to this session and Microsoft Azure, let me tell you that you have a free sign into Microsoft account. That means you can go ahead and create your account there and avail these services for a certain duration, which are available to you for free. So yes, you do not have to pay anything. There you have a free account. In that, you'll be having access to some of these services. But if you need advanced services, then you have to pay for it. And for those things, you have three options. That is your basic, premium P1, and premium P2. Let's try to understand these one by one, as in what are these and what do they have to offer to you. Now, if you scroll down and if you take a look at this thing, you have your Azure Active Directory Basic. Now, this basic is nothing but it is designed for people who are task workers or who are focused on a particular application on cloud. Now, it takes care of everything, your single sign-ons, your SLAs, and it ensures that the security is 99.9%. And it provides you with all these features which you can see here, that is your self-service password resets and all those things. You also have access to quite a few things like your proxies and all those things. I won't be getting into the details of what proxies are and all those things. But yeah, for people who are admins and who have worked on these topics or in these domains, they would understand what do these things mean. So yep, you have access to all these things which fall under your basic option. Apart from that, you have something called as your premium P1. Now, this is for people who want to scale up. So when you try to scale up, you'd be dealing with quite a few things, and terms like your IAM and all those things would come into picture. Now, IAM is nothing but your identity and access management basically, which is a very important point when you talk about Active Directories. So yes, it provides you with these things as well, or these facilities as well, like identity protection, your security in the cloud, and all those things. Everything is taken care of for this particular model. Now, when you talk about premium P2, if I scroll down, this is what you have. It is designed for more advanced protection. That means you'd be getting all the services that were provided in basic and P1. Apart from that, you'd be having some additional services which ensure more security. That means it focuses more on privileged identity management. Now, again, this is something that you can read and understand. It is very easy, but to give you a basic difference, your first thing provides you with your basic services. That is your basic access gives you basic Active Directory service access. Then you have your premium version, which is focused for scaling up. And when you talk about P2, it focuses more on advanced security. So these are the three different editions that you can choose from. Now, if you're somebody who is belonging to a particular organization and wants to go ahead and use these services, he can actually go ahead and read all these things and then go ahead and take a decision accordingly. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm quickly going to go ahead and switch into the demo part. For that, I need to go ahead and open my Microsoft Azure account. So let's do that. Well, my internet is kind of slow today, so it might take a little longer while than normal. I can click here on portal and there you go. It would ask me to sign in. I would be using a dummy account today for this so-called demo. I wanted to give you an access to or view to quite a few directories and all those things. So that is why I did go ahead and create an account and or certain Active Directories created or basically certain accounts created. Now, this is how the Azure portal looks like for people who are completely new. Again, you have your dashboard here. Apart from that, you can actually go ahead and create quite a few things. That is your virtual machines, your data factories, and all those things. For people who want to know all those things, they can actually go ahead and refer the other videos that are there in this series, and you'd know quite a few other things as well. But as far as this session goes, we are here to talk about Active Directory. So let's head into it and try to understand how do you go ahead and create Active Directories and all those things. Now, how do you navigate to a particular Active Directory? Now, if you scroll down here, you'd be seeing an Active Directory here. For people who have an account on Microsoft Azure and have access to all these things, they would have an Active Directory by default. So you just have to come here and click on it, and a particular dashboard would open up for you people as well. Now, this is how it looks like. You have all these things, an overview, getting started. You have users, groups, which you can manage and monitor. You have devices you can connect to. your various app registrations. As I've told you, you can manage multiple applications as well. Now, in that case, what happens is, as I've mentioned, you might be dealing with multiple applications. So a particular user, what applications should he have access to? What domains does he have access to? What are the devices that are configured? All these things can be controlled or managed from here basically. So this is what your so-called Active Directory does. Now let's move further and try to create some users. Now, how do we do that? Well, I can click on this icon here and it would give you the list of users that are already there. As you can see, there are quite a few users here. This was a demo account, so we did go ahead and create so-called users so that you can have a look at them. This is something that I created yesterday, that is Chris Pratt. Now, how do you go ahead and create an account? I would be talking about all these things. To give you a start, you have to click on this thing, new users, and this window opens up. Now again, I'll have to go back and show you something else. How do we deal with all these things? Well, first and foremost, you need to give in a pseudonym or a name of the person for which you want to create a user. Apart from that, you need a particular domain name, or yes, a domain name for a particular domain service. Now, how do we get that? Now, these domain services have to be registered with your so-called Azure Active Directory. So I have these accounts here, right? So I can use one of these accounts to just go ahead and create a particular user. Suppose I want that user to be assigned or maybe associated with this ID. So I can select this domain service extension basically. Again, click on new user. So what name should I give to this particular user? Now, I am a huge cricket fan and recently I watched England's match. So let's pick name of one of the players that belongs to England team. Say Sam Billings, and again, this is where I would be creating the user. Say I say Sam Bill as a pseudonym, and I give in this domain details, that is at edureka.tk. Now this is something that is configured already. That is why I can use it and I can have an account. If I used an ID that was not registered with this Azure account, I wouldn't have been able to create this user because it would have given me a particular error. As we move further, we would be taking a look at that as well. But for now, let's go ahead and create a legitimate user, that is this one. Now it verifies whether the name is proper or not. Name is something you can use in any which way you want to, but your username has to be legit and valid. So I have these details which I've entered. Configuration not required, properties can be default, and if I have to assign him a role, I can click here. You can see the name is verified here as well. Let's make him a global admin maybe. And again, you'd be given a password here. If you say show, it would show you the password, and I would suggest that you note it down because you would be required to go ahead and log in, and in that case you might be needing this password. So a suggestion that you note it down. I say okay here and I create the user. Now it might take a while because at times there are certain things that take a while, but in this case it has happened pretty quickly. So as you can see, we've gone ahead and created a user. His name was Sam Billing if I'm not wrong. So yes, there you have this account which is Sam Bill. And if you click on it and open it, you can have access to that account where you can enter in other details, what applications that are there under this user and what applications do you want to assign, which devices do you want to configure, and all those things. If you scroll down, you have some other options as well, sign-ins and audit logs. Now I won't get into the details of these things, but you can assign all these things to this particular user as well. So yeah, this is what the user looks like, and you can actually go ahead and log into this Azure account through this user profile as well. We can do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create or open an incognito window where I'm going to go ahead and log in as this user. Let's just say incognito. And now if I try to log in, I would have to enter in the details. I've actually gone ahead and tried logging in, but I've forgotten the credential details. So let me just quickly switch to this window, copy this email ID and again switch here. So this is the email ID which we have, Sam Bill, next. And my password was, I hope it is right. Yes, so when you log in for the first time, it would ask you to enter the current password. And then you can enter the new password, let's say, and then you re-enter the password. There you go, and you sign in. So what happens is you enter into this portal as a fresh user. See, I'm a completely new user and it says, do you want to start a tour? But I don't want to do that, so I would just say maybe later. There you go. You have your fresh dashboard. There is nothing pinned here and everything is completely new. So yep, you've entered in as a completely new user. And this is the Active Directory where I'm assigned to. That is my previous Active Directory. As you can see, this is what we have here to offer. So yes, as a user, I have certain privileges and I can have access to this so-called portal. So this is something I wanted you all to see. There are quite a few other things which we are going to go ahead and take a look at it. But for now, let me just log out and close this tab. Now I'm back here. The other things I want you to understand, and those things are, if I come here, what you can say is we have certain users here, right? There you go. Now, if you take a look at certain email IDs, you can see these email IDs. Now, these are quite huge email IDs, right? What happens is when you do go ahead and register your domain service, you register that domain service with Microsoft Azure account. And when you do go ahead and create users, you would not want to have such use names. That is, say, for example, Vishal at Microsoft something, 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 something. That can be long, right? And that is complicated to handle or manage. So instead, what you can do is you can provide them with pseudo identities or pseudo IDs as well, so that the process becomes easier or simpler to handle. Let's try to do that and see how can we do that. Can we just go ahead and assign a particular domain name or a domain service when we just go ahead and create a new user or all those things? So in order to add a particular domain, what you have to do is you have to go ahead and again, where is my Active Directory? Here it is. And I just kind of scroll down. You can see custom domain names where you can actually go ahead and add domain names, but there are certain catches to it. Let's try to understand those. Now it would ask me to enter a custom domain name and I say demo domain maybe. Yeah. And let me give it some extension. Now, again, let me tell you that this is a demo practice and it won't take in this particular domain name. I'll tell you why. But first, let's just try to add this domain. Yeah, the domain name is added. But as you can see, to use demo domain.add with Azure AD, create a new text record with your domain name registrar using the info below. So if I say text, I need to copy this part and I have to actually go ahead and add this to my particular domain name. Now, I won't be going ahead and doing that because that is something that we are not discussing here, because for that we would be needing some other domain name which I do not have right now with me. So if you do go ahead and try to add a particular domain name, you need to have that particular domain. That is, suppose I'm using a particular website or I have a particular organization which has a particular website or a domain name that is xyz at xyz.com or something like that. So I need to make sure that I go ahead and register or have access to that particular domain, and then I need to go ahead and attach this particular text to it or authorize this text with it so that I can actually go ahead and confirm with Microsoft Azure that yes, I have an access to that particular domain, and only then can I go ahead and use this particular domain with my Microsoft Azure. Now if I click here on verify, it would give me an error that I'm very sure of. See, could not find the DNS record for this domain. DNS changes may take up to 72 hours to propagate. That means I have 72 hours to go ahead and add this particular text message to that domain, and so that I can verify that yes, this domain is legal. But in this case, it isn't. I just took something for the demo purpose or for the reference sake, and this is the domain that I might have or which I can actually go ahead and use. So yeah, this is how you actually go ahead and add a particular domain, and you can actually go ahead and create a user as well. What you have to do is when you do go ahead and register this particular domain, you can just go ahead and follow the processes like creating a user, which we did in the previous case, because that was the registered domain. When I used that so-called edureka.tk, it was registered with my so-called Azure account, and I could actually go ahead and register that particular user. But in this case, I cannot. But yes, if you do go ahead and create a particular domain, or you want to go ahead and create a particular domain or register a particular domain, make sure that it is valid and it is under use. And you can actually go ahead and register that particular domain by using this particular process. So yeah, this is how you actually go ahead and do all these things. Now, when you have this particular domain, which is not registered, and if you do go ahead and create a particular user on it, what happens is your Microsoft Azure would let you create that user, but the credentials or the access that user has is as a guest user, because your Microsoft isn't sure that this domain which you just created is actually registered or something that you can actually go ahead and use. So that is one point which you need to consider. Now let me just quickly go back to my Active Directory and see if there are anything or any points that I need to discuss with you or something that we have missed upon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about something else called as creating an Active Directory. Or can we create multiple Active Directories? That is a question. If you ask me, I would say yes, definitely you can create multiple directories. Now, as you see here, if I go to a particular directory, I would be having an option called as switch directories. Now, if I click here, I have certain options from which I can pick a default directory. Now, in my case, I have quite a few directories which I can actually go ahead and choose from. But I want to give you all a demo as in how do you go ahead and create one, because these are something that we have created for the practice purpose or certain usage purpose. So let's go ahead and create a fresh one. So how do we do that? Can we just go ahead and create one? Well, yes, definitely we can create one. If you just scroll down, you have certain options here. We had an option of creating a new directory. Let me just go ahead and see where that option is. See, yes, this option, create a directory. So let's start by giving it certain names, say Edureka 1234. Not 1234, let's call it say Edureka maybe. Is it there? Yep. And what should be the domain name? Edureka 121. Edureka 121. State, well, since I'm from India, let's stick to India, and I say create. Now it might take a couple of minutes when you just go ahead and create this so-called directory. So yep, meanwhile you bear with me. And there you go, you have your directory here. You can just click on this thing to manage your directories. As you can see, it's a completely new directory which is fresh and new to use. That means, as you can see, it's Edureka. And if you click on any one of these things, you won't be having anything else. Now, in my previous Active Directory, I had so many users. And if you come here, you'd see there's just one user, main admin. I do not have anything else or no other user whatsoever. That means this is a fresh directory. Like as you can see, if you just go back to the Edureka option, you'd be having an option of resetting your so-called directory, and you can do that as well. But I do not want to do that for now. I can just click on this and I go back. See, here's the option. You can click on it and you can switch the user. So yeah, you can use multiple directories and you can have multiple users for these directories as well. Now I can just go ahead and create users for this directory as well, but I won't be doing that. Now, since I do not need this directory, I'm just going to go ahead and delete it. So I click on this icon. I do not have permissions probably, so I click on it and I ensure that permission is granted. I say yes and I save changes. It might take half a minute to update these properties, or if the internet is slow, it might take longer as well. There you see, the changes have been updated. Now if I refresh this thing, the access is given to me. I can just, I don't want to delete the dashboard. I just want to go ahead and delete my so-called Active Directory. So I do not have an access to my domain services, because of which I'm not able to delete this account. But yeah, you normally have an option where you can actually go ahead and delete this directory. So yep, you can go ahead and do that as well. So yeah, this was the demo about Active Directory, as in how do you go ahead and create a user, how do you create a particular domain space or domain service basically, how do you go ahead and create multiple Active Directories. I hope you all had something new to learn out of this session. But as far as this session goes, I would be resting my session here. If you do have any queries, make sure that you put those queries in the comment section below, and I would be more than happy to get back to you on those queries as well. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!